if you go swimming at the beach today, your odds of a shark attack are roughly 1 in 11.5 million.
Right, which is basically zero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But your odds of getting struck by lightning on the drive home, that's about 1 in 5,000.
Yeah, that's wild to think about.
It is. Yet, I mean, most of us are completely terrified of the ocean, and we don't think twice about thunderstorms.
Oh, totally. We just walk around every single day absolutely positive about these facts.
Yeah, willing to bet our savings on them, completely unaware that our own brains are just playing tricks on us. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are exploring the massive and honestly often invisible gap between casually absorbing the information around us and, actually building reliable, rock-solid knowledge.
Yeah, which is so crucial right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you look at the mechanics of how we learn, you quickly realize how much of our daily understanding of the world is built on quicksand.
I mean, in an age of just total information overload, understanding the mechanics of how knowledge is actually made, tested, and verified, it's the ultimate superpower.
It really is.
It fundamentally changes how you interact with a headline, a health claim, or even just like a casual conversation with a neighbor.
Right. But before we get to how professionals do research, we have to look at the incredibly flawed, messy way our brains naturally gather information in our everyday lives, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a mess. We generally rely on personal experience, secondhand knowledge from family or the media, and our own internal mental frames.
And we're pulling from the 11th edition of Understanding Research Methods for this, right?
Yes, exactly. And the text notes that to process all that input without becoming completely paralyzed, the brain uses heuristics.
Heuristics, meaning essentially mental shortcuts.
Right. They're basically evolutionary energy savers.
Yeah.
The human brain is a wildly calorie-hungry organ.
Yeah, it takes a lot to run.
Exactly, and processing complex statistical realities takes a ton of energy. So over millennia, the brain developed these cognitive shortcuts to speed up decision-making.
Which sounds great, but I'm guessing there's a catch.
Huge catch. The trade-off is that these shortcuts lead to predictable, systematic biases. A really classic example is the availability heuristic.
Okay, what's that?
It tricks us into confusing how easy something is to remember with how frequent it actually is in reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky demonstrated this brilliantly. If you ask people, are there more words in the English language that start with the letter K or words where K is the third letter?
I feel like most people would say words starting with K.
The vast majority of people will confidently say there are more words that start with K.
Well, let me actually try that. Words starting with K. Kite, keep, kangaroo, kitchen. I mean, that's instantaneous.
Right, they just pop into your head.
But K as the third letter. Ask, bake, cake. Wow, that actually feels physically harder to do.
It takes genuine cognitive effort, right?
It really does. It takes, like, actual focus.
Because the starting with K words are more available in your immediate memory, your brain takes a shortcut and assumes they must be more numerous.
But they aren't.
No.
Okay.
In reality, there are over twice as many words in English with K as the third letter.
Wait, really? Twice as many?
Yeah. Our brains swap out a really hard question, which is, what are the statistical frequencies of English vocabulary?
Right.
For an easy question, which is, how quickly can I think of an example?
Oh, wow. And that's exactly what's driving the shark versus lightning fear we talked about at the start.
Exactly. Shark attacks inspire blockbuster movies. They dominate the evening news. They're highly visible, visceral, and memorable.
While lightning strikes are vastly more common, but they rarely get that kind of sustained cultural attention.
Right. So we miscalculate the risk because our brain relies on what is most available in our memory.
And when you pair that mental laziness with confirmation bias, I mean, things get really skewed.
Oh, confirmation bias is arguably the most powerful mechanism of flawed thinking.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's the human mind's tendency to selectively notice, accept, and remember information that fits our existing beliefs,
while actively ignoring or forgetting information that challenges them.
Exactly.
It essentially functions like a smartphone's social media algorithm, but like built into our biology.
That's a great way to put it.
It feeds you exactly what you expect to see, which makes life feel frictionless and comfortable, but it totally filters out the complex reality of the world.
Perfectly said.
But let me push back on this a little bit. If our brains are hardwired for these deeply flawed shortcuts, if we're naturally prone to this stuff,
Yeah.
doesn't that mean personal experience is basically a terrible, totally invalid source of data?
Well, no, personal experience isn't invalid. It's just incomplete. It's a starting point.
Okay.
In systematic research, investigators don't pretend they're emotionless robots with a perfectly objective view of the universe.
Because that's impossible.
Right. Instead, they utilize concepts from the textbook known as positionality and reflexivity.
Okay. Positionality and reflexivity.
Positionality refers to the researcher's own identities, beliefs, and societal privileges. Reflexivity is the active practice of reflecting on how those personal factors might influence the research.
Give me an idea of what that actually looks like in practice. How does a researcher apply that?
Sure. Imagine an academic studying urban poverty.
Yeah.
In their published paper, they might include a positionality statement, explicitly stating, I grew up in an upper-middle-class suburb and have never experienced food insecurity.
So they put their background right out there on the table.
Exactly. They're mapping their own potential blind spots. They're telling the reader, this is the lens through which I viewed the data.
I see. It doesn't erase the bias, but it makes the research transparent and trustworthy because they aren't pretending the bias doesn't exist.
Spot on.
So because we can't fully trust our own mental algorithms to naturally arrive at the objective truth, we need a formalized system to catch those blind spots.
Yes.
We need a blueprint, basically, which leads us to the actual process of research.
Right. Moving from casual everyday observation to systematic research is very much like building a house.
Okay, how so?
Well, you don't just start throwing bricks at a lawn and hope a living room appears.
Right, that would be a disaster.
You have to move from abstract ideas to concrete sequential choices. You need budgets, meticulous records, a structured approach.
Makes sense.
And when researchers design this blueprint, they generally tackle the problem using one of two major forms of reasoning, deductive or inductive.
Okay, let's break the mechanics of those down because this seems to be where the actual scientific method takes shape.
Definitely. Deductive reasoning is what we typically call top-down research.
Top-down, okay.
You start with a broad pre-existing theory, and then you test it in a specific, concrete instance to see if it holds up in the real world.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, the textbook uses standard dog training. The overarching established theory is positive reinforcement. The idea that rewarding a behavior increases the frequency of that behavior.
Right, so you have the theory first.
You have the theory first. To test this deductively, a researcher formulates a very specific, testable hypothesis.
Like what?
Like, if I provide a food reward every time this dog sits, the dog will sit more often than a dog that receives no reward.
Got it.
The researcher then sets up an environment, operationalizes the variables, meaning they define exactly what counts as a sit and what counts as a reward, and they gather empirical data.
They literally just count the sits.
Exactly. They analyze that data to either confirm or reject the original theory.
But what if you don't have a theory to start with? Like, what if you're looking at a phenomenon that nobody's ever studied before?
That is where inductive reasoning comes in. This is ground-up research.
Framed up.
You don't start with a theory. You start purely by observing specific facts or patterns, and from those messy observations, you formulate a brand new theory.
Give me an example of inductive.
The book uses a math class. Imagine a researcher observing a standard high school math class. Over a few months, they notice a pattern.
What kind of pattern?
The students sitting in the front row consistently score higher on exams than the students in the back row.
But they don't know why. They just see the data points.
Right. They have no theory yet, so they intervene to see what happens. They randomly assign seats.
Oh, they mix it up.
Yeah. They take the struggling students from the back and move them to the front and vice versa. Then they observe the next round of test scores.
And if the scores change?
If the previously low-scoring kids suddenly improve, the researcher takes those specific localized results and builds a broader theory about spatial proximity to the teacher and academic engagement.
Oh, I see. Observation first, experiment second, theory third.
Exactly.
So deductive reasoning is like following a precise, established recipe to see if the cake turns out right.
Yes.
While inductive reasoning is like sitting down at a restaurant, tasting an amazing mystery dish, and trying to reverse engineer the ingredients so you can write your own recipe from scratch.
That is a perfect analogy.
But is one of these approaches considered more rigorous or scientific than the other? Or is it just personal preference?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the textbook outlines this as a cyclical process. Neither is better. They serve different essential functions.
So they work together.
Yes. You use inductive reasoning, observing the world, to build a new theory. And then once that theory exists, you use deductive reasoning to test it, poke holes in it, and refine it.
The reverse engineered recipe gets tested in 100 different kitchens.
Precisely. They constantly feed into each other.
Okay, once a researcher decides how they are going to approach the problem top down or ground up, they have to decide what kind of materials they're going to use to build this house.
Right.
Are they collecting numbers or are they collecting stories? Which brings us to the divide between quantitative and qualitative research.
This is perhaps the most fundamental methodological choice a researcher makes.
Let's start with quantitative.
Quantitative research takes an empirical approach. It relies on objective, measurable data.
So lots of numbers.
Yeah, it reduces human behavior to numbers, uses large sample sizes, and its primary goal is to be able to generalize its findings to a massive population.
So this is your closed-ended surveys, structured statistics, hard metrics.
Exactly. On the flip side, qualitative research takes an interpretive approach.
Meaning?
It focuses on subjective meaning and context. It uses very small samples, relying on extensive, deep interviews and observations. It deals in words and nuances rather than statistics.
So for example, from the text, if we were studying an endurance runner, a quantitative approach would strap a monitor to their chest.
Right, it would measure their resting heart rate, track their miles per week, calculate cholesterol levels.
It's looking for objective, numerical facts about human endurance.
While the qualitative researcher leaves the heart rate monitor at home entirely.
If you just talk to them.
Yeah, they sit down with the runner for 3 hours and ask, how do you define the feeling of being healthy? What does pushing past the pain mean to your identity?
They're looking for the subjective experience of endurance.
Exactly. You see this contrast clearly in institutional studies as well, like the textbook's example of a police oversight board.
Okay, so imagine a city police department struggling with a crisis of low morale and high absenteeism.
A quantitative approach would send a multiple-choice survey to all 1,000 officers on the force.
Right, you calculate the exact absenteeism rates, cross-reference them with shift schedules, and look for statistical correlations across the entire department.
But a qualitative approach would identify just 10 officers and sit down with them for deeply personal, unstructured interviews.
To find out why they feel demoralized. Like, what are the underlying fears? What's the unwritten cultural code in the precinct driving this?
Exactly.
It feels like quantitative research is a drone flying at 10,000 feet, looking at a massive traffic jam. You can see the total volume of cars and the speed of the delay.
Great visual.
And qualitative research is sitting in the passenger seat of one of those cars, asking the driver why they're crying. But wait, I have to challenge this. Isn't qualitative research dangerously subjective? I mean, if I only interview 5 or 10 demoralized police officers out of 1,000, how can I possibly call that statistically valid data?
What's fascinating here is that this is the most common critique of qualitative work, but it misunderstands the objective entirely.
Oh, okay. How so?
Qualitative research isn't trying to generate a universal, statistically representative metric.
It's not.
No. As the text notes, the goal is holistic understanding. It is designed to capture the deep, messy nuances of human behavior that a multiple-choice survey simply cannot measure.
I see. If you only use a drone, you never learn why the traffic jam started.
Precisely. And to truly understand a complex problem, modern researchers frequently use mixed methods.
Using both.
Yeah, they use the massive numerical surveys to figure out where the problem is, and the deep narrative interviews to figure out why it is happening. They tell a compelling story together.
Okay, so we have these incredibly powerful tools. We can use massive numerical surveys to track the habits of thousands of people and deep psychological interviews to extract their innermost thoughts.
We do.
But history shows us that when the drive to collect this data goes unchecked, things can go terribly, terribly wrong.
Unfortunately, yes. The development of ethical standards in research is not just administrative red tape. These rules were forged directly in response to horrific historical abuses.
Because before the mid-20th century, there wasn't much oversight, right?
There was very little formalized oversight protecting human subjects. That began to change with the Nuremberg Code in 1947.
And that was in response to World War II.
Right. It was developed to define legitimate medical research after the unimaginable atrocities committed by Nazi physicians on prisoners in concentration camps.
It set an international baseline.
Yes, making it absolutely clear that voluntary informed consent is non-negotiable.
But the abuse wasn't just happening overseas in wartime. The U.S. has its own incredibly dark history with this. Specifically, The Tuskegee syphilis study.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at the details from the text,
Yeah.
it is staggering.
The Tuskegee study is one of the most devastating ethical failures in American medical history. It was initiated in 1932 by the U.S. Public Health Service.
Okay.
They enrolled 600 black men in Alabama, 399 of whom already had syphilis, and deception was the central mechanism of the entire study.
Because they didn't tell them they had syphilis.
No. The men were told they were being treated for bad blood, which was just a vague colloquial term used at the time.
Wait, so there was just zero informed consent from day one?
None. But the most horrifying aspect of the methodology occurred in the 1940s. Penicillin became widely available and was established as the standard life-saving cure for syphilis.
And they didn't give it to them.
The researchers actively and intentionally denied this treatment to the men in the study.
That is just...
They intercepted their medical files and went to great lengths to ensure they did not receive penicillin from other doctors.
I have to ask, we often think of science as inherently good. Did the researchers in the Tuskegee study actually justify this to themselves as good science? Because they were just empirically observing a natural phenomenon, completely detaching themselves from their humanity?
Sadly, yes. They rationalized it through a terrifying detachment. They viewed the men not as patients requiring care, but as a rare, untainted data set.
Unbelievable.
The researchers argued that if they cured the men, they would lose the opportunity to empirically observe the long-term natural progression of the disease all the way to autopsy.
So their obsession with pure, uninterrupted empirical observation completely blinded them to the human suffering they were causing.
Exactly. And a study didn't end until a public whistleblower exposed it to the press in 1972. It ran for 40 years.
40 years of watching people die for the sake of data. It resulted in a $10 million settlement, right?
Yes. And it proves why methodological rules, knowing how to design an elegant, deductive, or inductive study, are wildly insufficient on their own. Humans are not just data points.
Pure empiricism without morality is dangerous.
Which is why modern research is strictly governed by institutional review boards, or IOBs.
Right.
It is why principles like informed consent are mandatory, and it's why debriefing is required after any study involving even minor psychological deception. Science must be humane for its findings to be valid.
Understanding this dark history, along with everything else we've discussed today, it fundamentally changes how we should read the news.
It really gives you a critical filter. You stop taking data at face value.
Exactly. So to you listening right now, think about the journey we've just mapped out. We've seen how your brain takes lazy shortcuts, swapping complex realities for the availability heuristic.
Right.
We've seen how rigorous researchers build reliable knowledge through deductive and inductive blueprints. We looked at the power of mixing numbers with narratives and the vital ethical lines that keep science humane.
You now possess the foundational toolkit for critical thinking in a data-driven world.
The next time you see a flashy headline claiming a new study proves X, you now have the tools to pause. Look past your own confirmation bias.
Definitely.
Ask yourself if it was a quantitative or qualitative study, and consider the human element behind the data. Which brings me to one final unscripted thought I want to leave you to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
Well, the textbook emphasizes that informed consent is the golden rule of ethical research.
Yeah.
But think about the social media algorithms feeding you information right now.
Oh, that's a good point.
Are we truly giving informed consent to the tech companies running real-time mixed-method social experiments on us every single time we scroll?
Wow.
Something to think about. Catch you on the next deep dive.